one option that he has to fight and kill his own kinsmen, his own family members. So, and then he doesn't want to do that because he thinks, no, they are my own people. The second thing that is there is Arjuna is thinking that I am a Kshatriya, and as a Kshatriya, I am supposed to, fight and kill the Atatainas, aggressors. They are aggressors actually. They have taken away everything from Arjuna. And this is what is disturbing Arjuna. He's not able to decide, what am I supposed to do? Because he is looking at his identity from a functional perspective. As a Kuru Nandana also, that is also a functional identity. And as a Kshatriya, that is also his functional identity. So Krishna, when he starts speaking, he actually tells Arjuna that, yeah, we have our functional identities, but at the core, we have our foundational identity. And that foundational identity is that we are spirit souls. We are not these bodies, we are souls. And that's how Krishna actually, when after speaking that, na anusochanti panditaha, Krishna takes this discussion further. So that is how the discussion is progressing over there. And it's a progression that Krishna is doing for Arjuna. So he says, na tvayevaham jatu nasham na tvam neme janadipah na chaivana bhavishyamah sarve vayam atah param. So we had discussed this verse in detail, and this is the foundation for all spiritual knowledge, to understand that we are not the body, we are soul, we are spirit. That is the first step in spiritual knowledge. For making any spiritual progress, this is a foundational knowledge that we should have. That's how Prabhupada also had given us this knowledge when he used to give lectures. One of the things that he used to harp on is, you're not the body, you're the soul. You're not American, you are not Indian, you are not Chinese, you're not French, you are soul. That's how Prabhupada also used to give. So from there, when he starts speaking, so the progression, that the way he makes is, so he says, okay, Arjuna, you are a soul, and as a soul, you are eternal. And he compares the two things. The two things which I'm mentioning is spirit and matter. So he basically compares, and then he says that actually, okay, Arjuna, whatever you do, even if you fight, no matter if you win or you lose, you will actually gain. That's how he puts it across in 2.37. Hatova prapshyasi swargam jitva va bhukshashe mahim tasmad utishta kaunteya yuddhaya krit nishchayah. If you win this battle, you will attain this flourishing kingdom. And if you lose this battle, if you die, then because you are a soul, you are eternal, you will rise to a higher level. You will go to the heavenly kingdom, you will attain the heavenly kingdom, and you will enjoy over there. So no matter whether you lose or you win the war, you are going to enjoy anyway. Either here in this material, in this world, or in the next world, you will enjoy. So there is no reason for you to not fight. But suddenly right after that, speaking that verse 2.37, Krishna completely transitions to the next level. He says, Sukha dukkha samay kritva labha labhu jaya jayo tato yuddhaya yujyasva naivam papam avapshyasi. He says, Sukha dukkha samay kritva. Be equipoised in sukha and dukkha, in happiness and distress, in labha labho jaya jayo, even in gain or loss, in loss or victory. Just be equipoised. So then from there, 2.39 onwards, Krishna makes it very clear that so far I have described this to you from a Sankhya perspective. He uses the word Sankhya over there in 2.39. But now I will describe this from a perspective of Karma Yoga. Buddhi Yoga is the word comes, and Prabhupada, I think, translates that as Karma Yoga, if I'm not wrong. You'll have to go there, and I might be a little off. You can go there and check, but that's not the point. The point is that Krishna is taking the progression higher. The discussion goes to the next level over there. So there, the point that Krishna is trying to make to Arjuna is that there actually that famous verse of the Gita comes. What is it? That don't be attached to the fruits. What is that verse? I'm missing the verse. Anyway, that's the most famous verse of the Gita. Karmandeva. Yeah, thank you, Matai. Karmandeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. You don't be attached to the fruits of your work. Now, one may ask, if I am not attached to the fruit, then why should I why should I do any work at all? So the point there that Krishna is making is that, don't make the pursuit of getting that fruit be your motivating factor. You should be motivated with something higher than that. So that's how Krishna actually describes it. And he says that actually, if you act in this way, if you're not attached to the fruits, then actually you can be, when you're detached from the fruits, but you act as a matter of duty because it is your duty, then you can free yourself from the bondage of work, and you will ultimately attain liberation. That's how Krishna puts it to Arjuna. And then there is this famous verse, and Prabhupada translates this beautifully. It is 2.50, where Krishna says, Tasmad yogaya yujyasva yoga karmasu kaushalam. Therefore, strive for yoga, Arjuna. He says, yoga is the art of all work. So Krishna makes it clear that I am teaching you the art of the work. Excuse me. So, and in that series, Krishna talks about samadhi. That if a person acts, ultimately he will attain samadhi. And when Krishna speaks like this, that is where, so Krishna is trying to take the discussion at a higher level. The progression is moving like this, but Arjuna is still thinking in his mind, in the back of his mind, he still have this his question: should I fight this war or should I not fight this war? And when Krishna talks about this person will attain samadhi, Arjuna is thinking, okay, if such a person, will he really fight or not? And in that context, he asked this question. So the pragyasya kabhasya samadhi sthasya keshava stitadihi kim prabhasheta kim asita vrajeta kim. He asks, what are symptoms of such a person? How does he walk? How does he sit? How does he control his senses? How does he engage himself in this world? And there, Krishna starts talking about, the symptoms of such a person. So we had discussed these verses in detail, 2.55 onwards. Krishna starts speaking. And then actually one of the important verses that Acharyas explain is 2.6. So 62 and 63 are the famous verses, where the fall of a person is described, due to lust. So we'll discuss that also in the series. But one of the most important verses is 2.61. Tani sarvani samyamya yuktasit matparaha vashe hi yasendriyani tasya pragya pratishthatha. So here Krishna actually, so Krishna is a very he is a very efficient teacher. Normally a student would ask a question and the teacher would answer that question and that's it. So here Arjuna is asking a question which we may think that it is out of scope for us. Definitely, at least at my level, I am not fixed in transcendence. My consciousness is not fixed in transcendence. So Krishna may just tell that, okay, these are the symptoms of such a person. So telling the symptoms is one thing, but how do we attain that stage? Actually, Krishna answers both. So he gives the symptoms also. These are the symptoms. And then he also tells Arjuna how to attain that stage actually. So he makes it very practical for Arjuna. So in that way, he answers these questions. So one of the things that Krishna says is 2.61. This Tani Sarvani Samyamya Yuktasit Matparaha. So he says, one who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control and fixes his consciousness upon me, Yuktasit Matparaha, is known as a man of steady intelligence. So actually Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that this is the verse where Krishna drops the first hint of his supremacy and his bhakti. So the point of this verse is that, control the senses, and keeping under the, so we may think, okay, after I have control, what do I do with the controlled senses? What is the point? There has to be some point, there has to be some object, after controlling my senses, I have to fix my consciousness, my senses on some object. You can't just control your senses and do nothing. This is just like a Mayavadi philosophy. In one of the very famous, I'm not going to take any names, I don't want to disturb people in case people follow someone, but one of the Mayavadi gurus, famous, and he has passed away now. So people use the word adjective Bhagwan for him. I'm not going to give a name, but when they show his pictures and when I read different things about him, because he's famous, people start putting things, people keep posting things about him on the social media also. So things that are mentioned about the pictures are also, he's like laying down, sleeping, his eyes are closed on a bed, relaxing like this. And then, the way people also mention about him is that he did not bother too much about things, he will be relaxing, contemplating on something. So now, is it that after controlling our senses, are we meant to sleep and do nothing? That's how at least it sounds from a Mayavadi perspective. But no, Krishna doesn't say that. In the Bhagavad Gita, if you see right in this verse, Krishna is saying that I am not just a teacher of the sense control, I'm also the object of the controlled senses. So actually, the, the senses, when they are controlled, they are meant to be fixed on Krishna, because otherwise it's not going to last for long. The senses ultimately need some engagement. Senses, later in the Bhagavad Gita itself, the senses are actually compared to snakes. Snakes, they just attack. One of the things that is famous for snake is they are, so Prabhupada also says that the most vicious or most envious creatures are snakes. Without being provoked, they attack. So senses are like that. You don't know when they will attack. So that's how Bhagavad Gita describes. So actually, the best way to control the senses is to give them, uh, an area, a scope within which they can operate. So actually, Krishna consciousness is not just one small scope. Krishna consciousness is very broad, and that's what Krishna is saying here. So yuktasit mat paraha. So fix your consciousness upon me. Now here, so far Krishna had not talked about his supreme position. This is just one place that Krishna mentions that, fix your mind upon me. So this is like, giving that, when we say coming soon, and what is that coming soon? This bhakti section is coming soon. That's how Krishna is describing. So he gives one hint here in 2.67, and another hint he drops in, I think, in the 3rd chapter, 9th verse, if I'm not wrong. And then 4th chapter, he shows the trailer to Arjuna. He doesn't give away the full picture still in the 4th chapter. So there, if you remember, right in the first verse, Krishna says, Imam vivasvate yogam proktavahanam aham avyayam vivasvan manave praha manurikshvake bravit evam parampara praptam imam rajarisha. So that's how he starts. He says, I gave this knowledge to the sun god, and through parampara system, it is coming down. And then Arjuna again catches that, so Krishna had already twice he had given hints, and here he is very, this is a very emphatic hint that he's giving to Arjuna. I gave this knowledge to the sun god. And Arjuna immediately asks a question that, how am I supposed to understand this? Sun god is billions of years old, and you are almost the same age as me. So how do I understand this, that you have given this knowledge to the sun god? And then Krishna reveals his supreme position over there. He says, Sambhavami yuga yuga, I actually come in every yuga. So here, this verse, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that actually this gives the different levels of controlling the senses. So the first level is that, we have to control samyamya. Somehow we have to control our senses. And then while trying to control the senses, we have to fix our mind, fix our mind on Krishna. And then that's how we'll be able to conquer. So the first level is that we need to control. The second level is we need to control senses. The second level is we need to fix our mind on Krishna. And the third is, once we are able to do this and we continue to do this for a long time, then we will be able to conquer our senses. So when Krishna is describing this, as I was mentioning, that Krishna is also giving us practical information on how to achieve this, how to attain this state. So Krishna also talks about what are the impediments in achieving this. So in that context, in 2.62, he talks about dhyayato vishayan pumsaha sangasteshu upajayate sangat sanjayate kamaha kamat krodha vijayate. Dhyayate vishayan pumsa, by contemplating on sense objects, attachment to those sense objects, develop. So the first thing that happens is, so in our mind, we have different desires, and these desires, like you may consider them as, say, bubbles in our mind. Some bubbles are small, very tiny bit, some are very big, and it is up to us how much we want to blow a bubble. And I am calling them as bubble because the bubble burst when we actually engages into whatever the desire is. Because generally the sense objects, it looks very attractive, it looks very big, but when we actually experience it, we understand that this experience doesn't live up to the initial, that what we had thought that it will be like. It doesn't live up to that actually. So that's why the bubble burst at some point. So the best thing is that we don't blow up that bubble. Now what happens is, it's not that simple that we don't blow up. There are certain things, certain desires that may come based on our past impressions. Now we may say that, okay, a person who, there are cases like that, who since his childhood he may have followed some, like he has been brahmachari, and very late in his life there might be cases of some lapse. So how does that happen? So actually these impressions are not just from this life, these impressions are from past many lives. So there are impressions like that, due to which our mind may have certain, it is conditioned in in certain way. Then we have our current perceptions. So our current perceptions also add to it. And then we have a hope for future enjoyment. In the future, if I do this, I will be able to get enjoyment like this. Like many of us would make holiday plans that, okay, I'll go to Disney and I do this, I do that. I'll go to Florida, I do this. Some people want to go to Las Vegas. Yesterday, Maharaj was talking about Las Vegas in his lecture. I really like what he said. So people make plans like this. So, the hope for future enjoyment. So past perceptions, past impressions, current perceptions, and the hope for future enjoyment. So based on that, we have different bubbles, so we contemplate on those things. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So what happens then? There is this Dhyayatu Vishayan Pumsa Sangas Teshu Upajayate. We develop attachment actually to those things, to those sense objects. And then what happens? Then if we contemplate too much, then Sangat Sanjayate Kamaha, and then it develops into lust. Now, what was just a little thought earlier, now it had grown to something much bigger. It has grown to lust, Kamaha. And then, now these kind of desires, some of these desires could be, within the scope of Krishna consciousness, in a sense that they are not against the principles of Krishna consciousness. Some of these could be against the principles. And then if we are not able to do this for whatever reasons, then kamat krodha abhijayate, you can't, people may say, your guru might say, you can't do this. Why can't I not do this? So krodha comes over there. So krodha, once it comes, then within that series, krodha bhavati sammoha. So what happens when krodha comes? It bewilders our mind. Now this is something that I have experienced firsthand in my life, and this is not very long ago actually. So I remember I was reading I don't remember what I was reading, maybe something on Quora. So there was this question that was asked that, what that is there something that you have done when you were really angry and you would ordinarily not do? So this girl was writing that, once she was this like 17 years or 16 years old teenager, and she was waiting on a bus stop with her father, and there was this one person came, and then he took out a gun, and then he pointed the gun on his father's forehead, and then he clicked the trigger, but the gun was actually empty. There was no bullet in it. So it's like click, click. So his father was really scared that he's going to kill me. But then he laughed that I was just kidding with you. And this girl became very angry, and then she just climbed on this man, and then she said, I don't remember what happened, but when I just left that man, I saw that there was ambulance and there was police. So I was thinking, how could this happen? This is not possible, that you can't even know, how you can't even remember what you did to that person due to which ambulance had come. But then I had a first-hand experience. I don't want to reveal what it was. It's a little personal, but no, the krodha, when it comes, krodha vegam, vega, it is, it's vega means it is very intense, so better is that we don't get angry. We may say that, we should regulate our krodha in such a way that we can use it in Krishna conscious for the service of Krishna. But my experience is that at least at my level, I should stay away from krodha. So when I did something which was unimaginable for me, I wouldn't do it at all. I can't even think about doing that, what I did. So sammoha, the mind gets bewildered, and then you completely lose control of the situation. You are just not in control of the situation. So actually mind, if you remember, so I was talking about that this is our second pass of the Gita. If you remember, in the first pass of the Gita, Krishna talks about that, he talks about that mind and intelligence. So he says that, okay, mind is in a certain mode of modes. We had read about the modes of material nature, right? The gunas. So the mind is in a certain mode and intelligence is in a certain mode. Does anyone remember what is the default mode of mind and the mode whether it's sattva, rajas or tama? So Krishna actually categorizes mind and intelligence in different modes. So what was the mode in which mind is categorized, and what is the mode in which intelligence is categorized? Anyone remembers?
There's a default mode. I didn't remember.
No. Whether this mind is in the mode of goodness, ignorance, or passion, and intelligence, whether is it in the mode of goodness, ignorance, or passion?
Mind is in a passion.
Passion and intelligence is goodness, I would
and
think.
The goodness, that's what I'm thinking.
I guess
Yeah.
it too.
I think it's
Everybody's wrong. Everybody's wrong.
Okay.
It's the other way,
Other way.
actually. Yeah, mind. Yeah, I think Jiva Mataji knows. So thank you, Mataji. So mind is in the mode of goodness and intelligence is in the mode of passion. And this is, at one level scandalous. Krishna says so many things about mind, and our acharyas have said so many things about mind. We were discussing the other day that Bhakti Siddhanta had said that you should beat your mind with your chappal, with your footwear, and with broom 100 times in the morning and 100 times at night. So how could the mind be in the mode of goodness, and how could intelligence be in the mode of passion? So actually, we know that the mode of goodness is basically categorized as, it is needed for our sustenance, for maintenance, and that's why Lord Vishnu is said to be, he is a deity of the mode of goodness, because he sustains, he maintains, and for creation, we need mode of passion. And that's where Brahma, because he is the architect of the universe, he creates, he is the deity of the mode of passion, actually. So intelligence is needed for creating new things. With our intelligence, we contemplate, okay, I should do this, I should do this. And then we need once we have, at an intellectual level, we have conceived of the idea that, okay, this is my idea and this is how I do, then the mind is needed to actually act on it. So intelligence is in the mode of passion. And of course, this is more in the sense of material intelligence. The material intelligence is in the mode of passion. So what happens is krodhat bhavati sammoha. So actually the mind, although it is in the mode of goodness, but it gets bewildered. And then sammoha smriti vibhramaha. So when the mind is bewildered, then the memory is lost. Now smriti vibhramaha, what is actually means is, Acharya explained that this refers to smriti shastras, because if you see smriti bhramshat buddhi nasho. So buddhi is actually intelligence. So buddhi nasho means intelligence is lost. So how do we strengthen our intelligence? By reading the words of Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. That actually empowers our intelligence. That is how we are able to decide what is good and what is bad for us. Intelligence is the faculty of discrimination, what is good and what is bad. So that has a basis. And in the case of devotees, it is the Smriti Shastras, the words of Sadhu, Guru and Shastra, Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. So actually what happens is, when Smriti Vibhrama happens, this Smriti Vibhrama is basically, we forget the words of Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. And when that happens, Buddhinasha happens, and when the Buddhinasha pranishyati. So when intelligence is not, we are lost, we fall down. So intelligence is our last resort against Maya. It is the last line of defense. And so this is a full series of events that happens, which leads to the fall of a person, that is described here by Krishna. So the idea is, Krishna is giving us the impediments on the spiritual path. So best is that we should not contemplate on the sense objects. When the thought of some sense object comes, we should try to remember Krishna. Krishna says actually in the Bhagavad Gita itself later, that whatever attracts us, it is just a spark of my splendor. So Pyari Prabhu also was saying this once. I really like what he said. So he was distributing books once, and he saw a very attractive lady, and then he got attracted for some time, but then he thought, okay, Krishna made him. If this lady is so attractive, then how much more attractive Krishna would be? So he shifted his vision from that to that sense object to Krishna. So that's how we actually have to control our senses. We have to think that, okay, this thing is attracting me, but because it is made by Krishna, Krishna would be much more attractive than this. So let me focus on Krishna. In that way, we can control ourselves. So that's how it comes. So I'll just quickly talk about I think we don't have much time to discuss more here, but in the context of the verse that we are discussing, Raga Dvesha Muktestu Vishayan Indriyascharan Atma Vasher Vidhyatma Prasadam Adhigacchati. So the word prasadam comes here. Prasadam means mercy, and we'll see that this prasad will come repeatedly now. Prasad is, as I was saying, is a mercy of the Lord. So there is this, we know that I was reading this, there is this, Christians say that this concept of mercy, concept of grace, that Hinduism has borrowed from Christianity. So actually that is not true. This concept of prasad has been there, in our scriptures since so many thousands of years, as we know. So we'll see how this mercy comes repeatedly now in the second chapter. Now, Raga Dvesha Vimuktestu. Raga is not our Raga Sindhu Prabhu. So this is actually, Raga means attachment to material things. So what happens is, Krishna had also said, if you remember 15.7, Mamayu Amsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana Manha Shashtani Indriyani Prakriti Sthani Karshati. All the living beings are my parts and particles. And because they are my parts and particles, actually that's not how the verse comes later. Manha Shashtani Indriyani is basically, they're struggling very hard with their 6 senses, which include the mind. But what happens, because we are part and parcel of Krishna, we are supposed to have attraction for Krishna. We are supposed to have attached. Krishna is also known as Raga Sindhu, so he is an ocean. So we are meant to have actually attachment for Krishna because we are his parts and particles. But we don't have attachment to Krishna. We don't have attraction to Krishna. We have attraction for material things. And that's where Manha Shashtani Indriyani Prakriti Sthani Karshati. We are struggling. Karshan means friction. So there is this friction that is happening and we are struggling. And, but if somehow or the other we can, remove that attachment to the material things and divert it to Krishna, then that Karshan will end. And then we will be able to enjoy real enjoyment actually. So what happens is that the matter is the material word, and we are by nature, we are spiritual. That is our foundation identity, that all of us are spirit souls. And matter and spirit, as it is described in Krishna, as it is described by Krishna in the second chapter itself, they are radically different, completely opposite actually. So there cannot be any compatibility between matter and spirit. So what happens is, when we try to find pleasure in material activities, in material sense objects, ultimately it gets frustrated. At some point it will get frustrated. So we have to have actually attachment to Krishna, not to material things. So that's what Krishna is also saying, that a person free from all attachment and aversion and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. So that's how this verse has come. I really like the way Vidhe Atma, Prabhupada translates this as one who follows regulated freedom. Now, when we may say, okay, if it is regulated, then where is the freedom? It is regulated. So actually, we may think that, we have so many regulations. We have to rise early in the morning, awake early in the morning, then we have to do our rounds, then we have to follow these principles. And if we compare it to a materialist, they don't actually follow anything. They sleep whenever they want to sleep, they wake up whenever they want to wake up. They eat what they want to eat, they sleep, they do everything that is possible. Actually, there's no regulation there. So they seem to be more free. So how can we say that this is regulated freedom? So actually, they may appear to be free, but they are bound in a sense that they are very, very attracted to the material objects. Their mind is completely bound by the hope for enjoying those material sense objects. And last time we were discussing that actually Krishna describes dukkha. So this is one of the questions that Uddhava asked to Lord Krishna in Uddhav Gita, that what is the definition of dukkha? So what is dukkha actually? So Krishna says dukkham kama sukha apeksha. Actually, misery is the hope of enjoying sense objects, the pursuit of happiness, as we were discussing last time. So that is actually dukkha. So actually they have so many desires, so many hopes, and they are, working very hard, and then what happens is, for working very hard to obtain those sense objects, they have to operate in the mode of passion. To work hard, you need a lot of passion. And one of the characteristic of mode of passion is, it fries us out. Initially we may have a lot of energy to do things, but at some point we just get this is, I can't do this anymore. This is too much for me. And that's how it happened for me also. When initially when I started my career, I was like, I do this, I do that, and I used to work like a hog or dog, whatever it is. And then after a few years, I realized that it is not possible for me. And then what happens is, then you start getting the true nature of the corporate world, and you can't work like a hog and dog, then you start seeing the results that start coming. Most of you would be aware of this if you have worked in corporate company. I don't have to go into details here. So actually what Krishna is saying is that when a person is free from this kind of attachment and aversion, and when he's able to control the senses through the regulative principles. Now, where does this regulative principles come from? How do we know what are the regulative principles?
From the Shastras.
Yes, exactly. So the regulative principles are actually the principles mentioned in the Shastras. And we know that gurus, actually, they speak on the basis of Shastra. So when they give us these principles, actually, these principles have foundations in the Shastras. And when we follow like this, then we will be able to obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. So I'll stop here and see if there are any questions, comments, or corrections about what I said today.
Okay, there's one statement that struck me. You said we are spirit and we should not be attracted to matter. Then why are we attracted to matter? Because many times we find ourselves, we are attracted to matter. If it is so different and it's so incompatible, why are we even attracted to matter?
Yeah, so that is a very good question, Mataji. So we are spirit, but we exist at multiple levels. So what I mean is, we have a physical existence, physical in the sense in the material world, we physically exist. We have a gross existence in the material world. Then we have a mental existence also. We also exist at the level of mind. And then we have a spiritual existence. So what happens is, the spirit is covered by the mind and the body. So the body is made up of the senses. We know that it is we have the knowledge acquiring senses, and we have the working senses. So there are 10 senses, and then the 11th sense is the mind. Mind is known as the king of all the senses. So now these, because we are inside a material body, we identify ourselves with the body. And because we identify ourselves with the body is made up of matter. We think that we are the body, and whatever gives pleasure to the body, we think that, okay, this is what I should do. And whatever that gives discomfort to the body, we don't want to do that, because we want to make the body very comfortable and we want to make the body very happy. So that's where we get attracted. So we can see that, okay, whenever we engage in some petty material things, and it gives instant pleasure to us. And mind is the center of all sense activity. So the one of the thing that mind does is it basically records our experiences. So it is like a repository of all our experience which we have had, not just in this life, even in the past lives. So it knows which experiences are pleasurable and which experiences are not pleasurable. They causes me discomfort. So say for example, someone ate an ice cream and he really liked that ice cream. So next time when he's going from an ice cream shop, the ice sees the ice cream shop, and what happens is we turn towards it. The leg starts walking towards that ice cream shop. So what happens is that the eyes, when it sees the ice cream shop, it gives the signal to the mind, oh, there's an ice cream shop over there. So then immediately mind says, yes, this is very pleasurable, and then it tells the legs to move, to turn towards that ice cream shop and go there. And then what we do is we eat the ice cream, and then we think, okay, it definitely gives some pleasure. That the pleasure is to the tongue actually. But if we eat a lot of ice cream, you know what happens. The next morning is going to be terrible. Our throat is choked up, and sometimes we might also get fever. So similarly, when a person who is attached to, say, I was talking about materialists, that they are bound by their the desires for sense gratification. So for example, if I live here and I go to work in a certain other town, and on my way I have a say a wine shop, and I see that wine, a bar actually, and I see that bar, and I may not have any attraction, or even I may not even pay attention that there is a bar. But when a materialist would go, he would always say at bar, he said, this is such a nice place, I must come here. There is happy hours at 4 p.m. So now it is like, just like there's a hook that is there in his mind all the time. And when he's at the work, he's working, he know that 4 p.m. there will be happy hour and I have to go there. So he'll complete his work quickly and then he'll run towards that bar. So interestingly, recently, not very recently, but in the past, I know Pranath Prabhu also went to a bar. I'm sorry, Pranath Prabhu, if you're on the call and I'm giving up your secret, but actually he went to the bar to distribute books. So that's a difference. So actually what happens is, we may go to a bar, but we may go to do a certain different spiritual activity, whereas a materialist would go to the bar because he's attached to that, because he's identifying himself with the body. And because the body has found some pleasure there in the past, his consciousness will get attracted over there. But we know that these pleasures are temporary. They are not, it may give some instant pleasure to us, but in the long run, it's not going to work for us. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, Mother, if you were thinking in a different line.
Yeah, you are. That what you're saying is we are thinking we are our bodies, even though we are spirits. We are not identifying with the spirit. We are identifying more with our material self. And that's why, at least to my understanding, we're thinking we are our bodies. And because our bodies are matter, we're attracted to a degree in matter. And because of our past experiences that are stored in our minds from previous lifetimes or from previous experiences, we have that hook in our mind, so that way we get attracted to something. If
Exactly.
if I understood you correctly.
Yes, Mother, thank you. And we don't consciously remember any spiritual experiences. That is another thing. If somehow or the other we can remember it, spiritual experiences, and actually to a certain, even for devotees, to a certain level, it is our fault also, because when we go to, say, a materially enjoyable place, say Disney or somewhere else, we'll go there and we'll click so many pictures, and we'll have memories for us. And when in the future we'll see those pictures, and then we'll say, oh, yeah, I went to Disney with my friends and I had so much fun over there. But similarly, we may have had some kind of spiritual experiences, some spiritual excess you would have, but we don't consciously remember that. I remember once I was reading a pastime of, it's very unusual, and there is generally devotees don't find anything very attractive about it. This is the pastime of Lord Varahadev. And I was reading this chapter in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and somehow I liked the chapter, and then read it again. and then I read it again, and then I read it again, and like that I read it 4 to 5 times, and somehow I was just liking it. And you know, one day I was trying to think, did I ever had any spiritual experiences? It's not able to recollect, and somehow it clicked to me that on that day I had this experience with this particular Varaha Dev's pastime. And actually Varaha Dev's pastime is, when he just comes and kills. There is nothing very lovable over there which you get attracted. But somehow I was getting attracted to that pastime. So then I realized, okay, that was also some kind of a spiritual experience. So somehow if we contemplate on those kind of spiritual experiences, that will also help us to go towards spiritual experiences, to spirituality, rather than go to material things. Prabhupada also, I remember, he said that once a devotee asked him a question that, how do you know that Krishna is a supreme personality or supreme person? So these kind of questions have been asked to him multiple times, and he had given different answers. But in this specific time that I am talking about, he said that, I know that Krishna is a supreme person because when I chant his name, I immediately get like a spiritual ecstasy. I immediately get a spiritual experience. So, and that's how, because I get that experience, I know that he is a supreme personality. So we also have to somehow or the other, when we get those kind of spiritual experiences, we have to, make it a point that we have to, we should contemplate more on those kind of experience. That, okay, I did this and I had this experience.
Yeah, Prabhuji, I'd heard two different lectures. One lecture, Sachinandan Maharaj says that sometimes we feel just by one instance, devotees switch their whole life around. And he says that's because of past experience. We have that Bilvamangal Thakur with the Chintamani, just that one sentence from that prostitute completely changes his entire trajectory. And that is because in his previous lifetime, he has reached wherever that point is. And that's why they suddenly change. For us, one little incident doesn't trigger an entire transformation. So whenever somebody does that thing, that means they had reached a certain point in their previous lifetimes. And then suddenly something triggers it, and then suddenly it changes the entire trajectory. That was one point he was making. Another thing, a couple of devotees were saying that these are, advanced devotees who quote Shastra. And they said, two of them were discussing, and they were saying, they have not memorized those words, but suddenly when they memorize some Bhagavatam words, they feel like we've said this before, and the words come so easily to them. That means at some previous lifetimes, they've already known that verse. And that's why it's so easily, like for us, we find the Sanskrit difficult. We have to carefully see what is being said. But sometimes, even though you don't know the words, it's unfamiliar words, you're able to pronounce it very much. Of course, these are, far advanced devotees. And they said that's because in the previous lifetime, probably they've already studied that verse, and that's why they feel that instant recognition is there, and that instant understanding of the words. And they know it by heart, even though they have not studied it before, So that was 2 points that different lectures I'd heard.
That's very true, Mataji. And I've heard from some devotees. Of course, I don't have those kind of experiences, and generally devotees don't share these kind of personal experiences. That's another thing. But I have heard from devotees about getting some personal experiences with some deities. When they look at the deities, sometimes they find them very attractive, and they just can't take their eyes off the deities, and they just want to keep looking and looking and looking. And they are like, sometimes I have heard from devotees that they kept looking at the deities for hours together, and then normally we would, at least I would go to the temple, I just take darshan of obeisance, I walk away, do something in the temple. I don't just stand over there and continue to take darshan for hours and hours. But definitely when these devotees, when they're taking these, if they are able to stand and contemplate on the deities, look at them for hours together, they are definitely getting some kind of spiritual experience, some kind of spiritual ecstasy. So of course it happens not very frequently. It happens once in a while. So, and one thing is, we should also try to share it with each other, I would think. Just as Christians have this concept of, they have this hour where they talk about their personal experiences. It's a very very regular program that happens in churches. I've heard that different, like, people will gather together and they'll share their experiences, that how Jesus manifested his grace in their lives. They talk about incidents from their lives, and then the devotees really get very emotional also during those kind of discussions. So I think we should
it
also,
increases their faith, and
Exactly.
it inspires other people to have that
Right.
faith. That,
exactly, devotees should also, I think we should do that. Don't do that so much, but
Do what you said, Karthik, Govind?
sharing our spiritual, in case we have had any
Experiences.
spiritual
Oh.
experience
Yeah.
by
yeah.
doing certain things, certain activities, and how did we
But-
feel the presence at some point. Krishna might have helped us in a certain way, or sharing
But
those
you-
experiences with other devotees. That's what I was saying.
You made a statement that we have these impressions of the past, perceptions of the present, and hopes for the future, and these are all different bubbles, you said, right?
Yeah,
And I
that's
was
how the
gonna
bubbles
say-
are formed.
I know.
The mind.
After a while, you recognize all of these bubbles burst at some point or the other.
Yeah,
So whether they are impressions of the past or perceptions of the present or hopes for the future, as long as they're material, they all burst.
exactly.
And then another thing you were saying about corporate life, one point you kept a certain pace and you thought you were going to, then you realize you can't keep that up, and then you finally realize no matter how much you do, it's not enough. And you have to
Yeah,
find
that's true.
a work-life balance, as they call it.
Yeah, when I was a bachelor, I used to do so much. But after getting family, kids, you just can't go at the same pace, right? So
Yeah. And there is no satisfaction no matter how much you do,
Yeah.
Whereas in spiritual life, there is definitely a satisfaction. Yeah.
right. So when I used to work at that pace, I remember getting back-to-back promotions year after year. But then at a certain point, you just can't keep up with the pace, and then when you see the harsh reality of the corporate world. Then there is stress and whatnot. You know it.
Yeah. At some point, you recognize it doesn't buy you anything.
Right. It gives you other kind of miseries. Your family
Yes.
life is disturbed, your health is disturbed. Okay, all right. I think we are about time now, so we can end here. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining. Vansha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhyabhya eva cha. Pattanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta koti vaishnavrind ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Ganpati Govind Prabhu ki jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.